Today I want to work on or show you how I put together this little mini journal. It's very cute. I used two envelopes. It has a little tuck spot here on inside the cover, and I have um, I have 32 pages front and back in here. So this is like perfect for like a daily entry for a month, or it could be an event you want to record. It's a it's a nice little size mini journal, and then there's a pocket here in the back for ephemera, and on the very back of the cover is another tuck spot. So I will show you how I created this, how I collaged it and put it all together. I'm using prints from Happiness and Crafting from G Curve, and I'm using digitals from Melina Art Designs. You get like 4 of these like wallpaper cards on a couple of sheets. She's got other kinds of wallpaper in there as well. But these are kind of cool because they're kind of layered. They're already layered for you. But you can use your favorite scrapbook paper. It doesn't matter. You can just use plain tea stain paper in the background if you don't want pops of color. You want to go more neutral, you can do that. It doesn't really matter what paper you use, whatever floats your boat. So I'll show you how I assembled this together. Now what you're going to need are 2 envelopes, and I have here craft envelopes. They don't have to be craft. They can be plain envelopes. It really doesn't matter. I also have like the rectangle flap, but if you have the one that comes to a point in a triangle, you can use that as well. You'll just be doing different stuff to the tuck spots. It doesn't matter. I think these are the these are like 5.5 by 5.5 by 4.25. Like a homemade card size envelope is what these are. And so now, if you're going to make just a little mini something with just a few pages in it, you can glue these together fold to fold, right? But if you want to put in a little bit more than just a few pages, okay, so you want to actually make a journal by itself rather than making maybe something you would put inside a larger journal with a few pages in there, you're going to really want to have a little bit of a spine area to kind of take up that bulk a bit. I'm going to be using a scoreboard only because the craft envelope is a little stiff. But you could fold this all by yourself without it. You could, if you have a thinner envelope, you can fold that by yourself. So you're going to want to make another score line. So here's your envelope above that original one. So you've got the original score line. You're going to want to put like a 1/4 of an inch just above that line. And you'll want to do that to each of them. Okay, there we go, just down like so. It's just a lot easier when you're working with craft paper to score it on something. And you'll do that to the second envelope. So to each envelope, you're going to score above that original score line. So now I'm going to take one envelope and I'm going to glue that little spine together. Oh, get my thing started this morning. I'm going to line it with the spine with some glue right down like that, and we're just going to set it inside the other envelope so that the spines are all aligned just like that. Get it down there. Craft envelopes take a little time to catch their glue there. All right, there you go. So you got your little cover started. And what I like to do, and I am going to do that with this one. Now, I don't know, it depends, I guess, on your envelope, but I don't want this to be too tall so that, when I go to put my ephemera in and out, I'll have to get behind here somehow. So I am just going to cut that down a little bit, and depending on how your envelope is arranged, you might not have that issue, but I'm just cutting mine shorter maybe take off 1/4 of an inch, and then just angle and miter that little edge so that, if you can see, you've got sort of this going on rather than having it so high. And this way, when you go to put your ephemera in, it'll be much easier than if it's way up here. So that's just how I adjust it. You may not need to adjust yours, and you just have to take a look and see what you think. I'm not going to cut them all off because I like the extra support. So especially if you have a thinner envelope, I wouldn't cut this whole section off. It might make it too thin, but but you could definitely do a little angle up there so it's easier to get in and out. Oh, enough on that. I've already inked around here very lightly before I did anything. Sorry, I didn't mention that. So this flap here is going to create the tuck spot inside the cover, and this flap back here is going to create the tuck spot back there. Now this is kind of sticky, so what I like to do, I like to take a piece of washi tape that I don't use a lot of, and I do like to, or you can take a piece of paper. I like to get that stickiness covered, because in the future, I just, especially here in Florida, I just think a lot about moisture and how things, over time, that glue can be activated by different stuff, and I just want to be careful that it doesn't get activated. So this is what I'm doing, and you may not really feel you need to do that, but that's what I'm going to do. There we go, and that way I don't have to worry about it. And it's all inside. All right. The other thing I'm going to do too is I'm going to cover these flaps with paper. Did want to give you a couple of tips in working with your envelopes. The flaps are always kind of, you're usually curved in. They're not like a perfect rectangle. And if you have the triangular flap, of course, you've got like the triangle. And unfortunately, they're not perfect either. The different sides, this side's going to be a little different than this side. It's just how they come off. The manufacturer, I guess, does it. So what I usually do is I cut a piece that's going to be a little bigger than my flap. Okay, just a little bit bigger, right? And if I'm distressing, I will distress the edge that's, going to you're not going to have free access to after you glue it. So I'm going to glue this down on top of this flap, even though it's a little bigger. And I am going to come up to the one straight edge that's here and put that down. You don't want to go over that too far. Okay, put this down. And then I trim my paper, because then you can follow the path of your envelope this way. So this way we have it all trimmed out, and we don't have to do any tracing, any worrying, or anything like that. So it's all done. So that's a tip for the flap, and I think it really works for most of the times you work with a flap. There might be times when it doesn't, but I think it does most of the time work that way. Then also, for this size envelope, I cut 3 triangles that were 3 1/4 by 5 1/2, and they're going to fit on this part of the envelope here. Now that's going to probably be a little different according to what envelope you're using, of course. If you're using a triangular shaped one, you're going to want to measure, first of all, you're going to want to leave, room here to take your ephemera in and out. So a good, maybe 3/4 of an inch would probably be a good distance. And you're going to measure that from here, and you're going to cut your triangle to cut. You're not going to cover this here unless you want to. You certainly can do it. It's a lot more work to do that, but I would just put in a triangle that covered it straight on down. And then you can put a thumb notch hole, half hole punch in here if you want. And then when you go to glue this in, you're going to glue right along here on the envelope and then lay your paper down so that you're not gluing this to the inside of your envelope. So that's just a little tip if you're using these triangular shaped envelopes. And then you'll want your paper to be somewhat heavy. You don't want it to be paper thin so that, you know, it won't tear too much. But that is how you would work with a triangular one. And as you can see, these ones that are shaped this way are easiest, quickest, and, you know, but I wouldn't want you to go buy a whole bunch of these if you don't have any. So enough on that. And so these, this size here will work all the way around those three sides because you have the tuck spot coming down, so it doesn't have to meet there. And I would just glue it in, just make sure you get the little edges. I'm also using scraps to make these with. You know, I know that I had a whole sheet printed out for this one, but this is a great little project for scraps and getting all those done and not really having to worry about them matching exactly. I mean, as long as you got the colors going, I think it works just great. Okay, now we can glue down the flaps here. So I'm going to just glue the edges and glue them down. You may need, if you're working with craft paper, you may need to hold it a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't catch right away. And there's that one. And then we'll go in and we'll glue down this one here. So now we have a really good spine. We don't need to do anything more to that. It should be substantial enough to hold a signature. Now, if your envelope is super thin, you might want to put a strip of cardstock down here on the spine. You can be the judge of that. Now we're going to work on the front part of it, and I'm going to be putting our lovely picture, and this is the one that I chose to work with for right now. And these here are part of Melina's kit, and I didn't ink that one yet, so I can work with this one. And I kind of like to make the photograph a little bit on the slant side, but that's really totally up to you. I think I kind of like that trim up there for this one. Yeah, kind of like that. Now, for my first layer, I'm going to put down some printed page here. And I'm not going to measure, just hand tearing it all the way around. You could do it with a ruler, however. And I think one of the secrets to shabby chic effect is all the layers that you can put down. Even though it may seem like a small thing, I think it adds a lot of dimension to the project. Now you could use music paper, you could just use plain tea stain paper, whatever you would like, but I think the different layers do make a big difference. Now I'm going to glue this first layer onto the cover. And I have just enough for it to peek out on the other side of this floral print. Now I'm going to work with the floral print and the photograph separately. I'm going to glue just the middle of that photograph just to secure it so it doesn't move. Because what I want to do is I want to put a layer between that and the floral page, so I want it to be open around all the different edges. I have a tea bag, used tea bag here that I'm just crinkling and folding any which way to get it behind. Now I'm going to addition some lace that I'm going to tuck underneath as the layer beneath the photograph. I'm also going to add or just, lay on top whatever other laces I may want to put as the final layer of this. Kind of like the little design on this piece of lace. It really seems to go with the photograph. So it's kind of the general direction I want to go in. I'm going to put a different shade of lace there on the bottom. Kind of matches that color up there on top. And the different shades of lace, I think, really help each one to stand out a little bit better. I'm going to use this sheer, very sheer fabric instead of the tea bag. Although this is pretty fiddly, I'm going to try to pin it down. Wasn't that easy to work with in the end. We'll just tuck that underneath there. And just kind of seeing what else am I going to put on top of there. And now I want to make sure that it's going to fit on my cover properly before I make it permanent. I'm going to sew all the way around the perimeter of the photograph and making sure that I catch the lace and the fabric in the stitching. So it's all in there pretty secure, but this did want to pop out quite a bit, so I had to put some glue in there. But I'm pretty happy with the way that all has turned out so far, and so I'll put that on top now. So now I have 4 layers. I have the printed page, the floral page, the lace and fabric, and the photograph. And so we'll put the 5th layer on. Still fiddling with that little piece of fabric up there. Now for the lace, I was going to wrap this around, but I decided that it might be fun to make like a dangle, especially since this section of lace kind of comes down to a triangle like. So I'm just going to fold it over and stitch it. I'm just going to stitch it with an X, simple stitch, a few times, and then I'll just secure it on the back. In the end, though, I feel like it's a little too plain, so I'm going to add a button to this and sew that on. And afterwards, just take a little fabric tack and glue it down right there at the top so the photograph shows. And the cover is complete. Now I'm going to sew in my signatures, and if you haven't sewn signatures before, this is like the perfect project to start experimenting. So I took 2 8.5 by 11-inch papers and cut them in half and folded each section and stacked them together. They fit just perfect in these this size of envelope, which I think is like 4.5 by 5.25, something like that. And I'm getting the fold and I'm placing it right in the middle of the spine there. Just lining it up. I'm going to clip the paper to the cover. I'm getting a book, old book that I use for this purpose, and I'm going to lay the spine flat down on the book and take my awl. I'm just going to eye up the measurements, one in the middle and on each end down about a 1/2 inch. Not even measuring. I'm going to get 3 times the height of my journal for the amount of thread. I'm using linen thread, and you want to make sure a little tail is held there. You're going to come up the bottom, go all the way up to the top, and come back through the middle again. And I want to make sure that each tail is on opposite sides of that middle stitch. Tightening it up and knotting it a few times. Now you could very well, and it's a square knot, so you're tying it with a different way each time. And I'm putting a bow in mine, although you could cut them off, close up to the knot. And voila. If you don't like your stitching, you can always cover it up with lace. So don't be afraid to try it. And I know I've been doing a lot of tutorials with the stitching because I want to encourage you to start sewing signatures in. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that little tutorial on putting together our little project here. And thank you so much for watching. And we will talk to you again real soon. Bye.